Hello, everyone. Uh, can you hear me? Okay, that's beautiful. So, welcome. I think it's been a beautiful few days with SBS. So I'd like to thank very much SBS for uh, providing us with this amazing opportunity for professional development. And I'd also like to thank National Geographic Learning for sponsoring this talk. I mean, this wouldn't be possible if they weren't here. Um, we have people from all over the place. We have people from Peru. I love Peru. I've been to Peru a few times. It's one of my favorite places. Um, and we also have people from New Mexico. We have people from, is that New Mexico, United States? That's lovely. We also have people from Salvador. Where are you from? If you type in the chat box, I can see you. Good evening, Caroline. Good evening, Gisele, and Guaraciara as well. Hello. So good that you are here with us today. We are going to begin in just a minute. Give people some time to arrive and settle down. We have people from Belém as well. Beautiful place. Very rainy. Hi, Danubia. So good to see you. Caroline from Bragança Paulista. I've been there, and I've been to Rio Claro as well. Amazing place. Lourdes, I love Lima. One of the best places I've been to. Amazing food. I really miss it. Uh, and from Santa Catarina as well. Yes, I know that you are a beautiful Troika member, Danubia. Okay, so we are about to begin. Just to a bit of a reminder, I'm keeping an eye on in the chat box. So if you have any comments, if you want to ask any questions, you are more than welcome to ask any questions at any time. And I'll do my very best to address all the questions that you have. There is a bit of a delay, so it might take a little while, but I'll be very happy to address any questions that you have. Okay? Right. So the idea of this conversation today is to talk a little bit about technology, but not exactly about technology tools, but rather how we can use technology in a way that it brings us closer. Um, Highlight. We've just started. Yeah. You see, this last year, I mean, the last year and a half or 16 months or so, they've been very, very challenging months, right? We had to change our life very quickly, and we had to adapt very quickly to a reality, and that was very different from the reality we used to live in. And one of the biggest consequences so far, it's been the amount of technology we've been uh, forced. I think that's the best word, forced to embrace. We had to spend uh, quite a lot of time looking at screens, and so have our students. And in many ways, I think rather than technology is a beautiful thing, because I mean, if we didn't have it, for example, we wouldn't be having people from so many different places talking to us right now live, and that's a beautiful thing. But the downside of it is the fact that rather than bringing us closer, in many ways, I think technology has somehow made us feel very much apart. And I was listening to. Do you like podcasts? I'm very much into podcasts, and I listen to podcasts almost every day when I'm jogging or driving or riding my bike. And I was listening to a podcast that was very interesting, and I'm going to mention this podcast a few times. It's called Together Apart, and in one of the episodes, they invited a psychologist called Priya Parker to talk. And one of the things that she said that I thought it was really beautiful, it was that this moment has turned all of our face-to-face gatherings into online meetings, right? But essentially, it doesn't matter that they are online. They are still gatherings, and because they are gatherings, they bring people together. Now, what as teachers, what we need to consider is how we can turn those gatherings into active learning moments, how we can turn those gatherings into beautiful opportunities for us to connect with our students and for our students to connect with each other, right? And I want to share with you a definition of what online learning is. And it's quite an interesting definition by Jennifer Mathies from the Online Learning Consortium. If you scan the code, you will have access to the article it comes from. So Jennifer says that online learning uses the internet as a delivery modality to offer thoughtfully designed, quality, student-focused learning experiences built on proven best practices that create effective interactions between learners, peers, instructors, and content. So you see, essentially what she says is that online learning is just a modality rather than being the learning itself. So you see, if you look at this quote very carefully, you will see that the focal point of this quote is the student-focused learning experiences, not the tools. I think over the past several months, we've been talking about a variety of different tools that we can use to do a number of things, but we haven't really discussed exactly what we are doing with these tools, at least not enough, in my opinion. And we need to establish that online learning is very different from face-to-face learning, right? When we are in a classroom, in a physical classroom with our students, there is a lot happening. You see, we have verbal communication, that's true, but a lot of research shows that only when we are, face-to-face, just about like 30% of the communication is established verbally. The rest, the 70% remaining of communication, is established through a variety of different ways, such as visual contact, body language, and just that oral perception that we have. We look at our surroundings and we understand what's happening in our classroom. So, for example, when you are in a classroom, in a physical classroom, we know when our students are bored or when they are tired or when they are upset, when they are happy, when they are engaged and participating. It doesn't really have to do with how much they're talking, but rather how they are interacting with each other, right? And when we bring that to an online learning environment, such as whether you were using Zoom or Google Meet or any other platform that's a synchronous platform, we very often we try to replicate what would happen in an actual physical classroom. But that's quite impossible. You see, I'd love to be seeing you all face to face because I'll be able to look at you and to see how you're reacting to what I'm saying. And you will be able to also see me moving and going about this talk with you. But rather, you were looking at me in this, small square. You can't actually see if I'm wearing, trousers or if I'm wearing my pajamas, and I might be wearing my pajamas. And because it's a very different environment, it requires a different approach. And we need to think about this approach so that we can bring to our students the best possible education. And what do I mean by that? You see, education doesn't need to happen only synchronously, only live. Education doesn't happen only when we are talking to our students on Zoom, for example. Education can also happen, and a good part of our lessons can also happen when students are studying by themselves. Good night, good evening, Simone. Very nice to have you with us. And we need to make sure that we use both synchronous and asynchronous moments. Synchronous, in other words, live moments, like the one we are experiencing right now, and asynchronous moments, in other words, moments of self-study. We need to use a combination of these two very different moments to ensure that education actually happens. When we look at when we look at asynchronous learning moments, we are essentially talking about online projects and collaborative learning as a whole. So, for example, when you get your students to work together and prepare a presentation, that perhaps the presentation is going to happen live, but the preparation happens when students are working outside class hours. Those self-study moments in which students are doing homework, but they can also be preparing for the following lesson, and moments in which students can actually self-assess their own practice, so that students can self-assess their own learning. And this is also learning. This is just as effective. This is just as relevant as the live moments, right? We can't really expect everything that would happen in a face-to-face classroom to happen in an online live lesson, because the medium, as I said, is slightly different. When we look at synchronous moments, Elizabeth, I'm going to mention that in a moment. How do we keep a good balance between synchronous and asynchronous moments? So you see, synchronous moments, they are essentially live lessons, or like this one, a webinar. Now, they can be mixed and matched so that we can actually offer the best possible learning experience online to our students if we keep a good balance, like Elizabeth just said in the chat. I really like this diagram by Juliana Schneider from Ohio State University, and she says that essentially, if we combine them both, it means that students, they can attend class from anywhere, essentially. They can communicate regularly with instructors, with teachers, with us, and they can network, and they can also make connections with classmates. Now, when they are studying by themselves, when students are working by themselves, they can complete work each week at their own pace. They can receive immediate feedback on quizzes. They can schedule group work when it's most convenient for everyone. And if they are working synchronously in a live moment, they can participate in real-time discussions during class time, and they can also improve presentation skills. Now, this diagram is not specific to English language learning and teaching. This is for education in general. Now, you see, even though this is not about English language teaching, it does say here that the focus of synchronous online classes should be real-time discussions and improving presentation or oral skills. Now, I was observing a lesson the other day, an online lesson that was happening via Zoom. And as it turns out, it was a lesson that the teacher decided to, the plan was for a listening lesson, right? So there were a few recordings. And the teacher in question, she was a fantastic teacher, very lively. Students, they were enjoying the lesson. And then she started, there was a pre-listening moment. So students, they started discussing the topic, and they activated their schemata. The discussion was really interesting. And then the teacher decided to play the audio for students to listen at home and do the activities, on their students' book. And half of the students couldn't really listen because of connection issues, etc. And I was thinking, but why is it that students actually have to do the listening activities all at the same time? Who says that all students need to listen to the same recording at the same time? And then I was thinking, what if students had, at their own time, discussed the topic, and then what if they had listened to that same track individually before the following lesson? Because you see, it's funny, if I start playing a video or a long audio here and you're listening with me, it's going to be a bit of a waste of time, because you can do this whenever you want. You don't need me here talking to you to actually listen to the track. And the same applies to our students. So if it's something that students can do individually, then let them do it individually. If you're talking about reading or writing, the actual moment of interacting with that content, it can be done asynchronously. Students, they don't need to do that face to face. What we need to plan for specifically here is that we need to plan for the online learning experiences very carefully, to make sure that we use the time that we have with our students in the best possible way. So well-planned online learning experiences, they are meaningfully different from courses offered online in response to a crisis or to a disaster. We had the COVID, the pandemic. Nobody had time to plan, and boom, it was very complicated. But essentially, we need to plan for online learning experiences in a very meaningful way, making sure that the live interaction that we have with our students is used for discussion, for debating, for making sure that we interact and connect with our students. Now, let's say that, for example, next semester, I'm not going to teach online anymore, but you might have one or two students that you teach individually as a private student, one-on-one, via Zoom. You don't need to actually do everything that you would do in a classroom with that student. You can let that student do a lot of work by him or herself as part of a continuum of skills development. So if this is done really well, you will see that we are not going to have this issue anymore, because essentially online learning normally has this stigma of being lower quality than face-to-face learning. But research shows the opposite, right? So these hurried moves online by so many institutions at once could actually seal the perception of online learning as a weak option, and it's not. One of the many impacts of the current moment is that many students, they decided to continue studying online for good, because they realize that, okay, I'm actually learning, although it's happening online. And we need to make sure that the face-to-face moment, the camera interaction, is meaningfully used, and that requires preparation. Now, if we go back to what we started saying at the beginning, this current moment turned those face-to-face gatherings into online meetings. But you see, when we are planning a gathering, a personal gathering, like a party, a dinner party, the party doesn't really begin when the guests arrive, right? The party begins if you are a guest, the party kind of like begins when you receive an invitation. So you have that very good friend of yours who sends you a text saying, "Oh, why don't you come over on dinner, on Friday for dinner?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure, I'd love to go." So you start building your anticipation to that moment. And then you start thinking, okay, what am I going to wear? What should I take? Am I going to take a bottle of wine? Am I going to take some dessert, or how do what's going to happen there? Who are the other guests? You have that anticipation that you start building. And if you're actually throwing the dinner party, your preparation begins a few days before, right? You have to go to the supermarket to buy food and then perhaps order something. And usually, you have to clean all the mess that might be in your home, and you have to cook and work on the sitting arrangement, and perhaps buy some flowers, and you want to make sure that your home looks really beautiful to receive your friends. So this preparation matters, because how we meet matters. According to Priya Parker, the psychologist that I mentioned earlier, she says that 90% of a meeting's success depends on its preparation. So this is very close to our lessons, isn't it? Because if our lessons are not prepared, it's not going to be successful. I mean, it's very unlikely that a very much unplanned lesson is going to be successful, because we're going to look at our students like, okay, I'm not really sure of what we are doing today. And Priya says a couple of other things, and she says that meetings, they begin when they are scheduled. So our lessons don't begin when they begin. Our lessons, they actually begin when students know that it's going to exist, the moment they enroll for our courses. Our lessons, they need to have very clear goals and aims for the medium we are using. So if it is an online lesson, we need to, online as in live, we need to make sure that the purpose of that live lesson is very clear. Why is it that we are meeting live? And we also need to transform the implicit in explicit. You see, one of the challenges of an online meeting, an online lesson that's happening live, is the fact that we lack many visual clues to see what's happening. Many teachers, many students keep the cameras off, although they might actually be there participating and they might be engaged, but they keep their cameras off. We don't really see what's happening. We don't know what's in the background. We don't know if students are sitting, in their bedrooms, or if they are at the beach taking part in the lesson. So we need to transform everything that's implicit in explicit. So rather than expecting our students to do something, we might actually ask them to do something. And that requires us asking participants to perform very clear roles. So each student needs to know very clearly what to do and at what times. Something that I've been doing as a teacher is that I have a document, a Google document for every lesson, in which all the instructions that I'm using are actually there. They are pre-written for each part of the lesson. Because if students, for some reason, they can't hear, or if there is something that happens, they can actually go to that link, and then they see what the instruction is. And then you might ask me, but Paulo, that sounds a bit complicated. How do we do this? What is exactly our role as teachers in this moment? Well, there is a very interesting psychologist, and he writes specifically about business and learning. And he, back in the 70s, he coined what is now known as the learning cycle. And he says that people generally, they learn like this. They have a concrete experience, right? So they feel something, and then they reflect on that experience. And through that reflection, through that observation, that person will then start conceptualizing things, and the person will try to apply that to have another concrete experience. So if you think, for example, about cooking, this is more or less how it happens, right? You see someone cook, and then you think, okay, I see that person cooking. I'll try here. And then it goes well, and say, okay, I can put the ingredients together. That's the practical application. If you can put the ingredients together, you can actually cook a dish. Our job is to make sure that even though this is online, that students are also given the opportunity to experience the whole learning cycle, so that they are given the experience of, a concrete learning moment rather than just looking at a screen. And there is a very interesting researcher called Joanne Harrison, and she says that an e-teacher, a good online teacher, is not the teacher who knows all the answers, or even a teacher who decides what the best questions are. A digital teacher is a learner expert who can help learners tackle their issues and find answers to their own questions. You see, our job in an online environment is very different from our job in a classroom. Because if you, right now, where you are, open a different tab, and just using your browser, you type in the name Joanne Harrison, you'll be able to read all the articles and everything else that Joanne Harrison has written. So my job here, rather than tell you everything that she says, or tell you, that I am the center of this knowledge, my job as a teacher is to help you to curate the content and to help you navigate the issues that you bring. Rather than me telling you what to do, is me helping you in deciding what to do. So our job essentially here changes. We become learning facilitators. And she says that we play three main key roles. She says that we need to manage the group. So we need to manage the interactions within the groups, both in a live, face-to-face online moment, but also if you're using a learning platform, let's say that you were using, for example, Moodle or Google Classroom, we need to make sure that students use these learning moments in a very interactive way, so that they are able to connect to one another. We are the ones who keep the discussion going, and who keep engaging students throughout the year. We are the ones who manage the activities, right? So we are the ones who should be thinking about interesting activities that will keep students engaged throughout the process. I agree, Renata. That's something that we should be doing in face-to-face lessons as well. And I'm sorry, there is a little typo in my slide. It's not learning management, it's learning management. And we help students manage the learning process, right? So we help students assess their own work, and we also assess their work. So we are the ones who manage that learning environment, both face-to-face, but also asynchronous environments. We can see and assess and measure how much learning has taken place, and how much we can actually work to help our students do better, right? If you want to have a look at this article, this is a fantastic article. If you scan the code, the Journal of Technology for English Language Teaching is free. And if you scan the code, you will have access to the article, and it's a very interesting article to read. So what's my take here? How do we do this? How do we create this culture that will foster our role as facilitators, that will help group management, activity management, and learning management? Well, I think first of all, we need to learn from our own peers. I think our peers are very often amazing resources. If we create effective communities of practice, if we interact with our own peers and see what they're doing, we learn a lot. Also, I think we need to use the technology we know. You see, if one of your projects, for example, let's say that you were working with project-based learning and that month you decided to ask your students to record a video, and you don't have to tell your students which tool they need to use to record a video. You don't need to decide on the app that they are going to use. Your job as a teacher is to think of the activity. Okay, so you are going to build, you are going to create a video talking about food in Peru, for example, for the sake of this talk. And it doesn't really matter which tools students use, because your job is to actually help students with the content, to help students with the language they might need, rather than the technology itself. Because if students actually type on YouTube or on Google, they'll find a very good, simple, effective tool to use, probably much better than we could. That's why I think it's very important that we allow for choice. We need to think of the outcome, not how to get to this outcome in terms of the technological tools, because there is no magical platform. All platforms, they will have advantages and disadvantages, and a combination of a variety of different apps, tools, services is usually best. We need to make sure that we promote equity, because you see, if you think of activities, or if you think of things that students will do that are too complicated, or that require very sophisticated technology, then you might be leaving someone behind, which is not good. And then we need to make sure that all of our students, they have access to the tools, to the services, to the technology that we propose. We don't want to make students feel bad about not being able to do something because they lack the tools, or because it's something they can't afford. I think we need to align expectations. The school administration, yourself, students, and very often families, they need to be on the same page. And I agree with what you've just said, Elizabeth. Students, they sometimes need something very simple. Simple is very good. Simple is often very elegant. And even though it might be simple, we need to plan, and then we need to test to make sure that, what we are planning works. And then we plan again, and then we test again. And we keep trying new strategies, new projects, new tools that will bring our students together. And it's okay if it goes wrong. Essentially, it is okay if things go wrong, because that's what happens in life. But as teachers, our job to get to this point, to get to a point in which we can, become facilitators, we need to really understand what's out there. And there is a framework that can help us assess where we are in terms of professional development, to make sure that we are able to use all the tools that we might need to use to make sure that our students connect meaningfully. There is a fantastic framework, this one that's called TPAC, that was developed in the late 90s, that essentially it says that, excuse me, I need a sip of water. The teachers, good teachers, they have three different realms of knowledge, three types of knowledge. First, there is the pedagogical knowledge. The pedagogical knowledge has to do with knowing how to teach, right? Knowing the best approach to teach something, what works and what doesn't work, which activities are appropriate for a given group of students, how to assess learning, how to prioritize, how to make sure that students are engaged and connected with the pedagogical practices that you are offering. So there is that realm. And then there is the content knowledge. For example, if I speak Portuguese, right? I'm a very decent Portuguese speaker. That's my first language. And I have pedagogical knowledge. But I actually lack the content knowledge to teach the Portuguese language. What do I teach? I teach English. Therefore, I need to, to have the knowledge of the English language. So how English language works, and I need to know grammar and syntax, and I need to know phonology, and I need to know the relationship between the words, and I need to know different verb tenses and verb forms and modal verbs, and I need to be able to actually turn my implicit knowledge of the language into explicit knowledge of the language. And then there is the combination of my pedagogical knowledge and the content knowledge, which is the pedagogical content knowledge. So I have the knowledge of pedagogy, of content, I put them together, and that means that I know how to use my pedagogy to actually teach the English language. And the third type of knowledge that teachers should have is technological knowledge. What is this? It's knowing about tools and services that will empower our teaching. So, for example, it's knowing that using Google services, for example, students can work collaboratively, knowing that if you go to that, there is a platform called Padlet in which students, they can, write posts on a virtual board. So it's not exactly knowing how to use all those services extensively, having a lot of technical knowledge, but knowing how that it exists and the impact it might have in our teaching practice. So if you have good, sound pedagogical knowledge, good, sound content knowledge, and if you have good technological knowledge, you are at the center of this framework, which means that you have technological, pedagogical, content knowledge. You know how to teach, you know what to teach, and you understand the technological tools that can empower your learning so that you reach your students and make sure that your students have the most meaningful learning experiences, both face-to-face, but also in online environments. Now, that requires quite a lot of experimentation. We need to, we read a lot about pedagogy. We read a lot about English language, but we also need to read a little bit about technology and the services that there are. We need to experiment and try new things, because if we don't, we are not going to know what works and what doesn't. Now, this first part, in the last 30 minutes or so, we talked a little bit about what our role as teachers is, both in an online but also in a face-to-face learning environment. The second part of our conversation is talking a little bit about motivation and what motivates students in general, so that we can bring this motivation closer to us, so that we can actually make this work in our favor, so that we can bring our students closer to us and to each other. How is it that people get motivated? What motivates people? Well, in my experience, and according to quite a lot of research, motivation is built through, first, a sense of belonging and a sense of community. To use a religious example, why is it, you can pray at home, right? But you can always pray at home. Why is it that so many people prefer to actually attend church or a synagogue or whatever? Because when you go to those places, you feel that you belong, you feel that you are a part of a community. There is also that beautiful sense of accomplishment. When you do something and it works, you feel good about yourself, you feel accomplished. There is also the element of group cohesiveness. When you feel that you are a part, that you belong to a community, and that community is, cohesive, you feel very happy about it, and you feel that you are progressing. So that feeling of progress, that you are learning and that you are capable of doing things and that you can learn even more, you feel motivated. And also when we have fun. Fun is an intrinsic part of any learning moment. By fun, I don't really mean laughing or telling jokes, but fun is that joy that we experience when we achieve something. Even if you consider, sometimes even a very simple multiple choice quiz, when we, I don't know, make it about the present perfect, if we score and we get all the questions right, we feel happy about it. We are having fun. We might not exactly have fun working on grammar, but there is fun in making, in tackling that thing. It's okay, I did it. I can do it. So when we talk about motivation, we say that essentially there are two types of motivation. We have intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is the motivation that comes from within. It's the motivation that comes from wanting to do things. And extrinsic motivation has to do with things which are, outside you. They are external, right? They are extrinsic. What is, for example, just giving an example of intrinsic motivation? Well, you are intrinsically motivated to eat. You need to eat. But at the same time, we also need to feel happy. Humans are intrinsically bound to happiness. We want to be happy. And we have that feeling very often that we feel motivated by things such as, okay, money or rewards, or that image that people have of a carrot in front of you. You get a little rabbit and then you trying to keep the carrot in front of it so that it moves forward. Those extrinsic motivators, they might work, but they only work for a certain amount of time. So for example, if you're working with your students, you might have had this moment with students turning their cameras on and or off. And then I observed the lesson a few weeks ago, and I was talking to the teacher, and that school had a policy of cameras always on. Students, if they are attending class online, they need to keep their cameras on. And if they don't keep their cameras on, they might lose marks. And I thought, okay, that's funny. That's an extrinsic motivator. Students, they are going to leave the cameras on because if they don't, they're punished, right? But this is not exactly the best way to motivate people. The best way to motivate people is to create the need. They will do that because they want to do this. So if you create the need, they are intrinsically motivated to do so. And how does that happen? Well, you might have heard of the hierarchy of needs by Abraham Maslow, right? So Maslow, he says that we all want to get to the self-actualization point. It's like we have this intrinsic desire of becoming the best we can be. That's where we all want to get. But this is only going to be possible if we get to the other steps as well. So for example, if our physiological needs are met, air, water, food, sleep. I don't know if you've had this feeling, just sharing a bit of a personal anecdote with you, of you are, attending a meeting or a lesson, and you really want to go pee. And, eventually you stop listening to what the person's talking, and you stop paying attention to anything that's happening around you, because the only thing you can think of is, okay, I have this physiological need that I need to address, right? And then we also have our safety needs, such as personal security, employment, the resources that we might have, having enough money so that we can afford our basic needs. We have our social needs. We need to feel that we are loved, that we belong, that we have friends, that there is a sense of connection. And also, we have our individual needs. we need to feel respected. We need to have self-esteem. We need to feel that we are free to choose things. And if all of those needs are met, then we get to the self-actualization point. So if you think of the cameras, for example, students, they are not going to turn their cameras on because you want them to turn their cameras on. You need to create the need for those cameras to be on so that they have the intrinsic motivation to do so. And how do we engage that? There are a few tips that I'm going to share with you that in my experience, they've worked so far. So I think we can link things to clear goals and outcomes. We can make sure that there are very clear purposes and outcomes for any student-to-student interaction. So how does this activity that I'm proposing is going to help them meet course outcomes or prepare them for other assignments? We need to provide with our students with clear instructions and expectations, especially if it's a new things or if it's a new activity or mode of collaboration. There you go, Caroline. They turn the cameras on in the breakout rooms because there is a need for them to turn those cameras on, right? I think we can use asynchronous tools when possible, as I was mentioning at the beginning. So having our students participate asynchronously enables them to reflect a little bit more on their contribution while they're also working on their written communication skills. So it's an interesting thing that we might not notice, that students are constantly working on writing skills when they are using those platforms. Just as Danubia said, we can build in simple accountability. We need to find ways to make sure that our students feel accountable for the work they do in any discussions or collaboration. If students don't feel that they are responsible for their own learning, if students don't feel that they are actively responsible for what they are doing, if they feel that the teacher is responsible for what they are doing, they are not accountable. If they're not accountable, they might not care as much. And just to illustrate this example, if we look at how teacher 1 and teacher 2 react here. So the first teacher goes, says, okay, everyone, I, the teacher, have got several choices for you to learn about different food items in different countries. I expect you to choose 2 different resources to explore for me, and I want you to also pick one activity to try. To get full credit, you will need to cite the resources. Now, the second teacher here is saying, okay, everyone, you have several choices for how to get to learn about different food items in different countries. Don't forget to use 2 different resources and then pick an activity for you to try. You can do more if you want. Now, remember to cite the resources to give credit to other authors and organizations and boost the credibility of your work. So when we look at what the second teacher here is doing, the teacher here is giving students choice. The moment that you give students choice, they become responsible for what they have chosen. When you feel responsible for something you've chosen, you feel that you are accountable for that. Both teacher 1 and teacher 2, they might get to the same point. But the second teacher here is more likely to engage his or her students because he or she is giving the students this element of choice. And this is really important because that will take our students from compliance to engagement. As we were talking about the camera on-off challenge, we can think of I expect you all to. Instead of using I expect you all to do, you can challenge students and say, well, your next challenge is. Instead of saying, I want you to do this or I want you to do that, we can always go for, what's a goal that you have for this? What's a goal that you have there? So if we change from teacher ownership to student ownership, we also generate and foster engagement. So instead of saying, okay, so here are 3 things that you need to do. We can go for, okay, here are 3 things to try as you are working. So when you do this, you're not telling students that they need to do this. You're giving them 3 possibilities. Instead of saying, okay, I've created some choices for you, we can go for, all right, you have several choices to consider, and then you choose one. So when we are okay, sorry, somehow I was disconnected. Just coming back, sharing my screen again. All right, we are back. So when we do this, we are essentially making our students more accountable and responsible for what they are doing. We are taking them from compliance to engagement. And as we do this, we need to make sure that this web of connections is very well catered for. Because you see, when we are talking about kids, teenagers, and young adults at the center of things, they will only be engaged if we manage to see this beautiful web of connections between school, and at school we have the culture, the coaches, the peers, the teachers, uh, and the connections that the school will have with the community, with their home. So students, they have relatives, they have parents, they have friends, and there is also their careers. So when we are creating activities that are engaging, that they are relevant and meaningful, to ensure that our students have a complete learning cycle by providing them with different tools and different possibilities, then we make sure that our students experience the best of our meetings. And I want us to go back to the quote that we began with, uh, that says that the current moment has turned all of our previous face-to-face gatherings into online meetings, but they are still gatherings. Our job here is to create a balance between synchronous and asynchronous learning moments so that our students get the best education possible, right? And I want to wrap up, and I'm going to open for questions, but I want to wrap up with this quote by Richard Branson. We don't learn how to walk by following the rules, right? We learn by doing and then falling over and then getting up and falling over again. We have a few minutes left. So I'm going to open up for any questions that we might have. I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So if we have any questions. Yes, Danubia, I totally agree with you. It's really interesting how asynchronous learning moments have highlighted the need for uh, more meaningful feedback. That's really true. Uh, I think as teachers, we are very much used to assessing things online, or online, I mean, on the go, as students are talking, students are doing things. And we now are given the opportunity to actually reflect a lot on our students' production, right? Thanks for the comment, Ruth. Thanks for the comment. If you want to get in touch with me, if you want to share any photos, you can follow Troika on Instagram. That's our Instagram and our website. And I hope to see you all around sometime soon, and hopefully face-to-face sometime soon. And I'd like to thank SBS for making this possible again. And I would like to thank also National Geographic Learning for sponsoring this talk. Yeah. So I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope you've enjoyed the event. Thank you very much.
Paulo, muito obrigado. Pessoal, bom final de semana, muito obrigado. Obrigado por vocês participarem do nosso evento. Bom final de semana.